Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Open to Work Beyond the Label, the podcast for talent in transition. Today, I have Dan Rivera with me. Dan is a training leader with over 20 years of experience working across military, federal, and civilian sectors. He's taught some of the most elite agencies from the FBI to Homeland Security how to master complex software systems and turn information into action. But Daniel's story goes beyond technical expertise. He's a passionate mentor and a lifelong learner, and someone who truly believes in the power of community and continuous growth. He's currently open to work, and this episode we are going to talk about finding purpose and the mindset that fuels long-term success. Daniel, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
So I want you to give everyone a glimpse of who you are beyond the label. Forget about all the career stuff and tell us who you are.
Okay, well, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up with one brother. My parents actually broke up when I was around 6 years old, so I can pretty much say I was raised by my mom, who I think did a fantastic job with both myself and my brother. It's funny because growing up, again, it was just my brother and we were like polar opposites. He was always at home watching Star Trek, and I was always outside doing other stuff. We got along great, but it was just one of those things. I'd see him in the morning when I got up, and I'd see him at night when I got back home, and not a whole lot in between. I went to high school. Right after high school, I joined the Air Force. I knew I wasn't ready to go into college, so I decided to do something else. I went into the Air Force, and I think that's where I really started to grow up and started to realize what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I became a military training instructor in the Air Force, which everybody else commonly refers to as drill sergeant. I did that, but as a military training instructor, after a couple of years, I transitioned into an academic classroom instructor. And that's where I really found my mojo. That's where I really found, I hit my stride, became an instructor there, got selected to be an instructor at the Air Force Officer Training School. And what was nice about that is that there's only six of those instructors at any one given time. So I was a part of a pretty elite group over there at OTS. Once I separated from the Air Force, I realized that my passion was training. And I got into a lot of sales training, and a lot of software training. So for the majority of those jobs, I was working for a software company, not only selling the software to customers, but then also coming in and training the end users on how to properly use it. And again, I was in my element because I just love training. Along the way, of course, I got married my high school sweetheart, and we have three children at this point, and actually two grandchildren following up behind them. Ever since moving down to Virginia from New York, I did find a good place, a good career path for myself in, again, being an instructor. I became a subject matter expert in visual investigative analysis software, and that's what I've been doing for pretty much the last 20 years, and I've been loving it. Now, outside of that, of course, I've got hobbies and friends, and family is very important. Of course, my faith is very important. But as far as my professional career goes, I guess I would say that I'm an instructor. I love to be trained.
Fantastic. Well, I will say that moving from doing to training is very fulfilling. I have experienced that myself. What was that transition like for you from doing things to training people? How did that feel for you, and what did it take to actually make that transition?
Gotta say, the transition was actually pretty seamless for me because I guess in a way I was always the type of person that would want to explain things, sometimes in excruciating detail, which I've been told by some people. But I've always wanted to make sure that whatever I was talking about was understood by the person I was speaking to. So explaining things and showing people how to do things the right way the first time has always been a passion for me. I always say if you do it right the first time, you don't have to go back and do it again. So it was something that quite frankly, I think was inbred in me from the very beginning.
It is so much better when someone gives you clear detail than not enough detail. So I would say that's a great skill set to have. Now, it probably took a lot of detail when you trained some of the most elite agencies in the world. So tell us about that experience and what are some lessons that stuck with you from that experience?
Okay, yeah. I when I started working with the agencies that you're mentioning, that you're talking about, it came about as a result of a job that I applied for. They were looking for an instructor, and they were looking for an instructor additionally that spoke Spanish. They needed a Spanish speaking instructor. So I'm a native Spanish speaker, so I applied. To be totally honest with you, I thought I was applying for another company. Totally different. When I went in for the interview, I looked around and I said, I don't think this is the place I applied for, although it was. And that was 21 years ago that this happened, and it's what I've been doing for the last 21 years. So evidently, some power, some force put me in the right place. I've been working with local and federal law enforcement agencies. I've been working with all the 3 and 4 letter, U.S. government agencies, all 4 or 5 branches of the military, if you include the Coast Guard, and actually a lot of different regular corporations around the world as well, because they were using the software that I was teaching. I've gotten a chance to travel all over the world. I've been to Spain. I've been to Central and South America multiple times. Of course, the Caribbean. A lot of places that speak Spanish, because I usually found myself as the only Spanish speaking instructor for what I did, which was kind of nice, kind of taxing at times. But what I did find across all the entire spectrum, whether it was stateside, whether it was overseas, regardless of what agency I was working with, what I did find is that there are a lot of people out there that really care. They really care about doing a good job. They really care about the safety and security of their country, whichever country I happen to be in, and they take ownership. They take ownership for doing their job correctly. So upon seeing that, I felt that if these folks were that serious about their job, then I needed to be very serious about what I was teaching them and how I was teaching them, to ensure that they'd be able to then carry out their charges, to the best of their ability. I didn't want to be the one element within their work environment that was deficient. I wanted to go out there, give them 100%, and allow them to continue to carry on with their jobs and their responsibilities to the best of their ability. I wanted to be a contributor.
And so, what, if any, challenges did you experience with the different cultures that you probably encountered across the world?
Yeah, since I spent the majority of my time working with, like I said, government and military, a lot of times when you talk law enforcement, you think, because of the TV shows and movies that you see, you think that all law enforcement people are cussing all the time, and they're rough and they're tough, and I found that it's not necessarily true. I found real people with real lives outside of their jobs. And I was very impressed to see how many of them can come to work and put aside their rest of their life for those 8, 9 hours that they're in the office, to make sure that they're doing the job correctly. And then, of course, pick up on regular life again once they walk out the door. I didn't see too many challenges. You got to be good at reading people. They say read the room. Well, you got to read the room, but you got to read people too, because within that room, there are individuals. And every individual has their own story. They've got their own personality. They've got their own way of learning. And sometimes one way of teaching is not going to reach the masses. So one of the things that I did learn was that I had to be flexible, and I had to be able to pivot at a moment's notice, to make sure that every student that sat in that classroom left with the understanding that they needed to leave with.
Yeah, I give it to teachers today because there are so many different learning styles and so many different ways that people need to be taught and to learn, and there's no one size fits all. And
Right.
so it's important that you know that. And I could only imagine, again, the cultural differences. That's just, I think about USA, right? Like a teacher in the USA, and then add the complexity of training people across the world. That must be tough. And then also the different dialects of Spanish. Did you run into that as a challenge ever?
Oh yeah, I got some stories for that. Both in Mexico and Peru. Peru was my first. Lima, Peru was my first overseas assignment, teaching what I was teaching at the time. And I get there, and I know that there's a difference in like you said, in dialects, because I've got an uncle by marriage who's from Peru, and boy, we had to learn some words, and he had to learn some words as well. So at the start of the class, I just pick up my mouse and I say, hey, listen, just so that we can all be on the same page here, I just gotta take the temperature in the room here. What do you guys call this? And all of them in unison said mouse. And I said, okay, we're going to get along just fine then because it's not going to be a problem. Although throughout the sessions, there were some times where I would say a word and I would see expressions on some of the students' faces. And after about the third time, I realized, okay, this word means something different for them. So whenever I get that reaction, I would stop and I would say, okay, what does that mean to you? And they would tell me, and then I would ask them, okay, so what word do you guys use? And they would tell
Yes.
me, and so then for the rest of the training, I'd make sure that I use their word, their common word.
Yeah, I learned that in high school because I'm Puerto Rican and we always call pens plumas. And then you get to school and they call it a bolígrafo.
Bolígrafo.
And I'm like, okay, that's gonna be challenging. And that was just one word. Socks was another thing, you know.
Casetinas, some people call
I
them.
don't know what they call it. That's why I didn't
Oh,
even say it.
medias.
Medias, yes,
Yeah, so
exactly.
I think calcetinas is what I heard. I was in Ecuador and I was staying at a JW Marriott and I was there for 2 weeks. I was there for work and I sent some clothes down to the cleaners. Well, when I got back to my room, my clothes was there and for some reason I couldn't find a belt that I had brought with me. So I called downstairs. I can't imagine why they would have taken a belt anyway, because you know how to dry clean a belt. Bottom line is, I'm on the phone with this young lady for about 10 minutes. She's just trying to figure out what a correa is. I'm calling it a correa, and I forgot what I think they call it a cinche or something like that. And we were just going back and forth. And after a while, luckily, I found the belt because as I was talking to her, I was walking around the room looking around. I found the belt and I said, never mind, I found it. But it was one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me in a hotel.
Yeah, and that's why it is a very important attribute that you've done this work globally because ultimately there are a lot of organizations that need that skill set. Like I just hired my first Spanish speaker and I've been here for 10 years like and I just hired my first Spanish speaker and
Okay.
he's done work around the world. And so I'm so excited to have that as a skill set. Most people don't get that opportunity, and most organizations would like to have that skill set. They just don't have the people for it. So that's an incredible skill set to have, and it's good that you have those hard knocks from the field.
Yeah. Sometimes learning the hard way is the way that you learn for the long term. You know, you'll remember.
Absolutely. So, are there any other learning lessons that you can share from your career that have shaped who you are as an individual?
Yeah, I guess along the same lines, just meeting different people from different backgrounds, different walks of life. I mean, I went down to El Salvador to train a law enforcement group down there, and I was amazed to see just how little they made, as far as salaries went, and the conditions that they were expected to operate in. And I stopped and I thought about it and I looked at all the stuff that we have here in the States and all the stuff that we take for granted. And it gave me a better appreciation of what it is that I have in anything in my life because there's so many people out there that are doing very, very important jobs and don't have the resources, that fraction of the resources that we have here. And that's both professionally and in their personal lives. One gentleman told me that he would travel 2.5 hours to get to work every day on these public buses, which are basically school buses, and they get packed to the top with people. They squeeze in as many people as they can, no air conditioning, and he travels on three of those buses, 2.5 hours one way to get to work because with the salary they made, they couldn't even afford to live in the city. So it really opens your eyes to the plight of other folks around the world.
Absolutely. One of my favorite learning lessons is I was having a conversation with someone and I was in the thick of all the weddings. I live in the West and everyone else that my family and friends are all in the East Coast. And so I was sharing my stress about flying back and forth for all the weddings. And so I was like, oh yeah, I have to go to a wedding this weekend. And the person I was speaking to looked at me and they said, it's nice that you get to go to a wedding. And wow, what a mindset shift.
Yep.
I get to go to a wedding. I get that opportunity. And so mindset of being grateful and being appreciative, even just waking up in the morning and being grateful that I get to see another day, has
Yeah.
changed my entire life.
Yeah, and unfortunately, most people don't take the time to even think about that because we're so busy in our daily hustle and bustle and bills to pay and anything else that a person has in their life, whether they're single, married, with children, without children, whatever, that oftentimes people won't take a minute to just stop and just look around them and see what it is that they have and just be grateful and appreciative for it. And I'm not saying that that's, they're bad because they don't. It's just that with life today, especially here in the United States, everything is moving so fast and so much that a lot of people just don't have the time to sit down and think about things like that.
Absolutely. So, speaking about being appreciative, I know that mentorship is a core value that you hold in being a mentor, and I'm sure you've had incredible mentors in your life. And so, what is some of the best advice a mentor ever has given you?
Yeah, well, let me just say, you can't be a mentor unless you yourself have been mentored. And so I never would have even tried. I've learned so much, and I've had and I maintain more than one mentor because no one man is an island within of itself. And you find people that are good in certain things, are knowledgeable and are successful in certain things. That's the first step. Is I really don't take on someone as a mentor unless they have fruit on the tree. If they're trying to mentor me on something that they themselves haven't accomplished, I'm not paying a whole lot of attention.
Yeah.
But I've been lucky in my adult life that I have found both men and women that have been successful in different areas of life, in marriage and business and finance, things of that nature. And I pretty much make sure that I stay close to them. I stay close to them because a good friend of mine told me a while back. He says, if you hang out with 9 bank robbers long enough, eventually you'll be driving the getaway car. So I make sure that if I want to be successful in certain areas, all areas of my life, then I've got to find people that have shown success and maybe try to be around them. One of the best things, I mean, I've learned so much from all my mentors, but one of the things that really sticks out to me, to your question, is you get what you fight for. I'll never forget that when I was told that many, many years ago. You get what you fight for. And it doesn't always have to be fight in the sense that, we think you got to struggle and you got to, no, it doesn't. That's not necessarily what it means. It made so much sense to me because I took a look at my life and I realized that throughout my entire life, the thing that I wanted, the thing that I focused on, and the thing that I put energy behind getting are the things that I got. The things that I sat around hoping for and wishing for, and praying for, not so much. So that's probably one of the things that was told to me that has stuck with me for decades now.
That's great advice. Hope is not a strategy, and putting energy towards what you want is critical. I think there's a lot of people that sit around waiting for life to happen to them versus going out and making life happen for them.
Exactly. I had a saying that said, some people are busy trying to find themselves while others are inventing themselves. And the ones that are inventing themselves are usually the ones that wind up where they want to be.
That is so good. So you're a fan of John Maxwell and Og Mandino. How have their teachings shaped your leadership style and who you are as a leader?
Well, that's a good question. John Maxwell, of course, he's recognized probably the top leadership, speaker in the world. And he's got a tremendous organization behind him. And of course, he was a pastor or a minister. I'm not sure exactly what his title was, but and so a lot of his teachings are faith-based. Okay, but although they're faith-based, he keeps them on a business level for the most part. I've read and I'm looking up right above the computer here, and I've got some shelves and I've got books galore and several John Maxwell books because I listen to them, and I've also subscribed to a John Maxwell audio program where you get one audio a month and you get to listen about different leadership. John Maxwell's delivery and the way that he approaches business and leadership basically has affected me a lot because it made sense to me. And that's interesting because there'll be some people that'll get up on stage and they may feel they have the best message in the world. However, if the person sitting in the audience isn't ready to receive that message, then you pretty much might as well be talking to a wall. Not through your own fault, but the fact is that communication is not going to be complete. Agmandino, on the other side, he does his teaching through stories. And one thing that I have found through my years as an instructor is that people love stories. They love for examples. And I make sure when I'm training that I'm throwing in, like the story I mentioned about going down to El Salvador and working with those folks. And I go deeper into it because of the subject matter in the classroom. But, Ogmandino, he believes that every person on earth is a miracle and that they should direct their lives with confidence. They should go after what they want with confidence. They should not only select the destination, but they should also select the path that they're going to take to get to that destination. And hopefully, and again, when you say about how it affected me, I believe in that wholeheartedly. I feel nobody's responsible for my success but me. And so, since I'm the one responsible, I'm going to make sure that I equip myself with everything I need to realize success, to get to where I want to go. And that goes back to the mentorship, finding the right mentors, honestly, reading the right books. I mean, the number one book for me is the Bible. May not be for everybody, but that's where I get a lot of my direction from. But then for business and things of that nature, I love the Ogmandino stories because every book tells a story, and I usually have to read it twice to really, really get the essence of the book. But I have found that through their writings, I have been able to apply the principles that they talk about, and it has led to me being significantly successful in what I do. And I don't take the credit for it. I'm just happy and satisfied with myself that I was open enough to accept people pouring into me either through books or through mentorship to make me a better person.
Absolutely. We can't sit here and expect that we're going to learn everything on our own. A lot of people have learned a lot of lessons through a lot of hard experiences that hopefully we don't have to go through, and we can just learn the lessons from the experiences that they've had. And when somebody is a good storyteller, that can completely change the world. Let's just be honest. I mean,
Right.
if you can hear a story and it can resonate with multiple people, right? Whether they're willing to accept or not, but they want to hear a story because everyone wants to hear a story, right? If you can tell a good story and you can share a tough experience and you can share the outcome that you learned from that, that could impact so many people that might not have had that experience, but had a different experience that they can take that outcome and then apply it.
Yeah, a lot of times people feel that when something is happening to them or when they're going through something, they're the only person in the world in all of time and history that it's ever happened to. And unless we share our stories with people, they'll continue to think that they're the only ones that are going through this, and they can't see a way out. And that leads to all kinds of distress and worse things. But I feel that having knowledge is a great thing, but not sharing it is a waste. It's like I can read every book in the library and have all that knowledge, but if I'm not sharing that information with someone, what am I doing with it? And so again, I think that mindset for me is what makes me so passionate about teaching. It's like I learn a lot, but then I want to teach a lot too. And the other side of that is that everyone is not an effective teacher. You have some people that have knowledge and talk about the knowledge that they know. And then you have some people that have knowledge and know how to translate and transfer that knowledge effectively to other people so that they can understand it. And that's what I try to do in anything that I do as far as training or mentorship.
Yeah, it's actually something I'm super passionate about, encouraging people to share their stories. But actually, I feel like not all of us are taught how to share our stories in a way that's going to be effective. So I could get on stage and tell everyone about my story, and at the end of it, they could say, okay, Laura, it sounds like you care a lot about yourself,
Exactly.
versus telling a story that can then give an outcome to somebody that they can take and apply in their lives, and it can be helpful, right? So you're right. Anyone can get on stage and say something, but not
Exactly.
everyone can teach everyone something based on the story that they tell.
That's true. Very true. And I think it's, if you're doing it on a stage and you're doing it to a large group of people, of course, the interaction is usually minimal as opposed to maybe in smaller groups where you're actually able to interact with people. And the number one way to determine what exactly and how exactly you're going to say it is by first asking questions and finding out about your audience, finding out about them first, so that then you can mentally tailor your delivery in a way that's going to actually penetrate and into their minds, and they're going to actually be able to be impacted. You're going to be able to impact them with what you're saying, as opposed to, like you said, just getting up on stage and just saying a lot of words and, thank you, have a good night.
That is such a good point. I tell my salespeople all the time, who are you talking to? Are you talking to IT? Are you talking to marketing? Are you talking to sales? The message is not the same.
Right. That's right. Not the same.
So I wanted to ask you because you talk about digging well before you're thirsty. Talk to me about that and how do you put it into practice?
Yeah, that's again one of my incredible mentors told me that probably 20 some odd years ago. He says you dig your well before you're thirsty. And I've put that into practice ever since hearing him say that. I've basically tried to put it into practice. And for me, that means taking a look at where I am in position A, looking at where position B is and figuring out what the path is going to be to get from A to B at any point, because you don't just get from A to B and then stop. If you're still alive, there's probably going to be a C and then a D and then an E. You're going to continue to want to move forward in different directions. And so what I'm doing now is I'm anticipating. For me, what that means, digging your well before you're thirsty, is anticipate what's going to be necessary to reach level B, let's say in this point, and start making the adjustments necessary so that nothing becomes a burden along the way. Nothing becomes a stop sign along the way. You might have some yields, you might have some speed bumps, but nothing you don't come up against any red lights. And if you do, you wait the 60 seconds. When it turns green again, you move again, but you got to be ready to move. So, digging your well before you're thirsty for me just means preparation for anything that you want to do.
Okay, so this is our first interaction ever, and I can tell you are the type of person that writes down your goals.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Absolutely. That there have been surveys made about people who write down their goals and people who don't write down their goals, and the percentage of people who actually reach their goals is so much greater for those that don't.
When did you start doing that? It took me till I was an adult to start doing that. When
Okay.
did you start doing that?
Yeah, as an adult also, I mean, come on, let's face it. I was, a young kid growing up in Brooklyn, teenager in Brooklyn, everything that there is, all the influences of New York City and the big city and everything. That I joined the Air Force. Now I've got my first real job with real money, that I can go out and spend, and stationed down in Florida, just running all over the place. Quite frankly, in the beginning, I was more concerned about what was going on Saturday night than what was going on 5 years down the road. That was my life. Of course, I get married, and quite frankly, in the beginning, because we got married very young, my wife and I were both in the same boat. Okay, where's the party Saturday night? It probably wasn't until we started having children that we said, "Holy cow, we got to get serious about this." But yeah, I started thinking about it as an adult, like you said, it happened to you. I started thinking about it more later on. You know, I don't want to say after the fun is done, because we're still having a ton of fun, and just making things happen and just going places, things of that nature. But I guess there comes a point in your life where you say, okay, if I continue to do the same thing, I'm going to continue to get the same results. So maybe now it's time to start strategizing and figuring out what results I'm looking for, and then figuring out what I need to do to get those results. And
How
so,
did it change your life? Like actually writing down your goals and coming up with a strategy for life, right?
yeah.
There's so many times where you set a goal and a strategy, but rarely do people think about it for my life. So how did it change your life to do that?
It changed my life. It just made my life so much more organized, so much more intentional. My life was more intentional. When you write something down, when you don't write something down, it's easy to forget. But when you write it down and it's staring you in the face on a daily basis, like, you can only, even if you want to, you can only ignore it, but for so long. And I won't lie and say that every single goal I've ever wrote down I've seen through, because sometimes priorities change. And what was important, an important goal for me last year may not be as important for me this year. So instead of being number 2 on the list, it might have dropped down to number 8 on the list. It might have come off the list altogether. But we have found, and I have found, that writing down your goals and staying as true to them as you can be, because of course there's always those outside unexpected influences that can throw a curveball at you at any time. But staying as true to those goals as possible really just kind of simplifies life quite a bit, I think, significantly for me anyway.
Yeah. We all have the day-to-day activities, and I think we all have something that we want to achieve. And what we hear a lot about people is anxiety, right? Anxiety, we're all experiencing this anxiety because of the world that we live in.
Uh-huh.
But there's also this concept that we have anxiety because of lack of action. We have these things that we want to accomplish, but we're not acting on it. And so writing down the goals and having a clear vision of where you want to go and then creating a path to get there, I think will help with a lot of the anxiety we're all feeling.
Yeah, let me say something about that. It's funny you say that because my wife and I, for the time that we've been married, one of the things that's we laugh about it actually is that I never worry. I never worry about anything. My philosophy is if there's something going on and you can fix it and get it off the table. If you can't do anything about it, then you're just gonna have to write it out and see how it turns out, and then deal with the results. But I'm not the type of person that worries, whereas my wife, she's a little bit more of a worrier. Okay, so when she looks at me and I don't look worried and I'm not acting worried, she wonders what's wrong with me. And all the time we've been married, she still hasn't realized that I just don't worry about things. But with the anxiety part that you talked about, yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's funny how we judge people on their actions, but we judge ourselves on our intentions. And we're so much easier on ourselves than we are on other people. So if we had a goal and we said we were going to do something and we didn't do it, we're so quick to forgive ourselves, which sometimes maybe is not the best thing because if you're going to let yourself off the hook every time, then why even set goals, you know? But yeah, the anxiety is like, I think the reason why people have anxiety in situations like this is because they're not willing to look at themselves as to why X didn't happen. We'll blame every other thing under the sun. It was Tuesday, it was raining, you name it. But a lot of people won't look inward and figure out why it didn't happen.
Couldn't agree more. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about us taking control of us, us
Yes.
taking control of our success. And so now that you are open to work, I'd love to hear what you want to accomplish. Like, let's talk about those goals. Like, what kind of roles or missions are you excited to take on next?
I'm excited to be able to contribute in an environment where I can exercise my years of experience professionally, personally, because to me, it all kind of winds up in one big ball. You can't be at work and totally ignore your home life. You can't, your personal life. You can't be depending on your job. A lot of people I've worked with, you can't be living your home life and totally forget about your work life. Sometimes they just kind of like cross over. And so I've been blessed that for years now, I've had great mentorship, I've had great experiences, I've learned a lot, and now I can take all of those different attributes, I think, and basically pour them into an organization that not only help them strengthen their business goals, but I feel one place where I can be very, very effective, where a lot of people may not even think about, is in the personal development of the employees that I come in contact with. Because too many people are just worried about themselves. And I don't mean to sound negative with that, but they go in, they do their job, and they go home and they're done. Yeah, they've got friends, they go to lunch, they gossip around the coffee machine, but very few people take an active interest in the development, and for me, especially of the next generation that's coming behind them. And that's where I spend the majority of my mentorship time, is in the generations that are coming behind me, because in a lot of cases, they don't have other sources for that. I'll just leave it
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah. I can tell that from this short time we've spent together, you are the person that people are inspired by in the office, that working with you gives them energy. So, what advice would you share? Because you had mentioned mentoring the generation behind you, and there's a lot of people who you've done a lot of different career pivots. What advice would you share for people who do want to pivot or who do want to reinvent themselves and they don't know where to start?
That's a good question. My advice is really simple because it's the one I used for myself. Too often people will get into some type of career field and they'll get that label, oh, I'm a human resources person, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a salesperson. And then they identify with their title. They identify their entire lives with their title. And they think that because they've been doing one thing for so long, that's all they're capable of doing. And what I would tell someone is that, listen, sit down and write down the strengths that you know you have. Write down the things that you know you're good at. Listen, if you're really, really daring, get around the people that are closest to you and ask them what they think your strongest strengths are. Because in a lot of cases, I don't know if you know familiar with the Johari window. In a lot of cases, there's things that other people know about you that you don't know about yourself. We all know that there's things about you that you know that other people don't know, but the opposite is always true. People see things in you that you don't in yourself because a lot of times we're our own worst critics. Had another friend tell me that comparison is the thief of joy. If you're comparing yourself against everybody else, you're not stopping to take a look at what your own strengths are, you know? So the advice I would give is realize, just like Agmendino says, that every person, to include yourself, on this earth is a miracle. Each one endowed with their own strengths, their own attributes, and it's something that you have to stop to think about and realize, because only then are the mental doors going to start opening in your own head to have you go out and pursue something that you might otherwise have not thought you could pursue or wouldn't be successful at.
That is one of the biggest themes that I like to talk about on this podcast is don't be your title. You're so much more than that.
Yes,
And
yes,
you can
absolutely.
pivot at any time. It takes mindset, it takes grit, it takes perseverance because it might not be easy, but anybody can do it.
I agree 100%. And, I also, along those same lines, the whole employment process, with resumes and cover letters. I mean, you can't look at a person's resume and know what's inside them. You can look at a person's resume and see what they've done. You can look at a person's resume and see what they claim to be good at. Because I mean, you're the one writing it, nobody's writing it for you, so you can put whatever you want on that resume. But to me, nothing ever beats a face-to-face conversation with another person, looking them in the eye and asking them the compelling questions that is going to basically bring out of them what's inside them, which to me is probably one of the most important aspects of an employee or someone that you're working with, is what's inside them, not so much what test they were able to pass in school to get whatever diploma they got.
Absolutely. Again, that's another great theme that we like to talk about here, which is that I want to highlight the humans that are out there that have resumes. They're getting an AI system saying they're not good for the job, when in reality, they could be the best person for the job, but they're not getting the shot to get in front of people. And so that is such a thing that I'm passionate about highlighting here, is giving people the stage to tell their story and to talk about what they're capable of, because it goes so much further than a piece of paper.
Oh
So
yeah,
thank you.
much
Thank
further.
you.
I had a buddy from high school who became a big muckety muck at a company in aviation company in New Jersey, and we were talking one time, and he says, "Yeah, I look at resumes, and if I don't see a top tier college, I don't." He says the first thing he goes for is the education, and if he doesn't see a top tier college, he says he just puts it aside. And I told him, I said, "John, you are losing out and missing out on a whole lot of talent, and you just don't know it." To each his own.
Absolutely. So, last question for you. Actually, I might have one more after this one.
Yeah, sure.
What's one book, practice, or mindset shift you'd recommend to someone who is looking to grow personally or professionally? You have shared so much insight and so much wisdom today. How do you inspire people, or what would you recommend for people to grow in themselves.
Yeah, the first thing you mentioned was, I believe, books, and I couldn't even begin to recommend one book because, like we already discussed, everyone is different, and everyone is growing, and everyone is coming from a different location. So this one is not one book fits all. There are some books that basically talk about just general principles and things of that nature. Like I said before, to me, the number one book is called the Bible. Alrighty, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which I think is a book that everyone should read, whether it's for business or not. And then I found another book amongst the many that I've read. I found another book called Uncommon, and it's by Tony Dungy. He was the coach of the Colts for several years. They won for when they won the championship and everything. And he wrote a book called Uncommon, and that book impacted me so much that I've actually given it to my nephew, I've given it to my grandson, and I give it to every young man in my family as they start coming of age, I say 15, 16, when they're able to read a book and understand it. I actually give them a copy because he just talks about, again, foundational principles for living a good life and being a good person. And I think that if you don't start with that as a foundation, then it's like building on sand. Structure is not going to last very long because you don't have a good solid foundation to build on. But as far as books, those are some of the ones that come to mind. And then I'll just mention one other thing you said, mind shift. Again, I go back to my youth growing up. There's a lot of things I said I was going to do, wanted to do. I actually, for being a kid growing up in the projects in Brooklyn, in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, which was a kind of a tough area back in the 70s and early 80s when I was still younger growing up there. I managed to stay out of trouble. I never got in trouble, never got arrested, never got dismissed from school, nothing. I actually wound up hanging out with five other guys who were kind of of the same mindset as me, which is typical. I mean, if you've got a gangster mindset, you're going to hang out with gangsters, but we were more on the educational, goal-oriented side and things of that nature. And hanging out with them through my early youth kind of kept me out of trouble. And I kind of saw some of the people that weren't staying out of trouble. And I'm saying, wow, I kind of like what I'm doing more, more than what they're doing. So that was a good mental foundation for me as a young guy. And so then growing up through the years, I just kept seeing that some people were doing the right things and some people were taking unnecessary chances. And I just didn't ever want to have to deal with the consequences of taking those unnecessary chances. Life is so much easier when you stay out of trouble. That's what it looked like to me. So I managed to do that. So but my mindset was actually set pretty early in life, from seeing the ones doing one thing and the ones doing the other thing and kind of weighing them and deciding which side I wanted to be on.
Show me your friends and I'll show you who you are.
Oh my goodness. Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres.
I love it. Okay, so Dan, how can listeners connect with you or support your journey?
Well, like you said, right now I am open to work, and I worked as basically on a contractor basis for many years now, which is kind of like what I like doing. I mean, full-time employment, yeah, I'll take that too. But I got no problem working as a contractor. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Not only and again, because I know that I'm not the only person in this situation. I've seen some people on LinkedIn that don't seem to be doing too good, I think, mentally or emotionally right now. So I do spend some time on LinkedIn and I do connect with them, and I try to send them some positive vibes and just stay in touch with them. One young man who seemed to be really in distress actually found a job, and I was very happy for him. He got hired down in Dallas. Took a picture of himself and posted a picture of himself on the plane going down to Dallas. I'm not going to end the relationship now that he got a job, because support is necessary through the good and the bad. So I've made a new friend, and I'll be keeping in touch with this guy. But yeah, LinkedIn is pretty much a really good way to get a hold of me.
Thank you. And you make a good point. For anybody who is open to work and ready to step into the spotlight and wants to highlight their story here on the podcast, please reach out to me. I want to give people the at bat that they may not be getting in interviews. let's put you on this grand stage and give you an opportunity to use this as a tool to find your next opportunity. So thank you again, Dan, for joining. It was so great meeting with you, and I am looking forward to connecting with you further and continuing to watch your journey.
Thank you very much. And I just want to thank you for what you're doing, because, for some people, a platform like this is exactly what they need, for someone else to see it and say, wow, I didn't know this person was out there. And, in your efforts, they say that you can always count how many seeds are in an apple, but you can never count how many apples are in a seed. And the seeds that you're planting right now, no one knows how far, how wide they're going to reach, or how many people they're going to bless. But that's exactly what you're doing. You're blessing people with your podcast, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. Stay in touch.
I will.